right. Heather Hart, Jeffrey Gibson, Ben Pease, Lindsey Hinmon. It has been such a privilege to get to speak with each of you individually for Relevance of Place here at Tippet Rise. And I know that part of the experience for you is getting to interact with each other and learn from each other. And now we get to have you together. To start out, I was struck by how often each of you brought up the fact that you were part of a family of creatives. And so I wonder if we could start there, the fact that you realize it now, realized it all the way along, that you were raised in a way that might have contributed to your creativity, and also how you carry that forward and how you change.
When I was a kid, I always gravitated to art because it seemed like an equitable place. I really believed growing up that it's like, oh, you could become an artist like everybody else. And then as I got older, trying to figure out who I am as an artist or who I was at the time, I started looking at my family history and seeing all the things that were made by my family. So everything from the horse shelter that eventually my great-grandmother occupied, and all the quilts that piled high in her bed, and the jewelry that my grandmothers made, and the clothes that they made for themselves, and the quilts that they made for us. As I started kind of trying to, again, figure out who I was, I realized that I was interested in making art, and they were making functional objects. I am interested in challenging other Native people to rethink what these things mean, because we have so much baggage from the last centuries to kind of work through. And as much as I think it's valuable to work through it, I think we can actually access traditional knowledge as a way to just sort of put it down and build what we need for ourselves today.
Yeah, I think with culture, with an indigenous community, we make things for our culture, not just for art, but to practice with, to believe with, to celebrate with. Like you were saying, Jeff, I think we have a responsibility to explore these things, to think about our culture and our traditions in new ways, because the world is changing faster than we can hold on to it, and it behooves all of us to really think about what is the new tradition, and how do we care for it moving into the future. My great-grandfather was a maker of things, a maker of what seemed to be cultural items to those people who collected those. And he would make things like parfleche bags, he would make arrow quivers, but the bags wouldn't open. I was looking in one of the arrow quivers and I opened it up, and inside was a rolled up newspaper wrapped around 2 bells. So they were non-functional, and they weren't at the same time traditional, but they looked to be so. But he was making them so he could provide for his family, same as his wife, my great-grandmother. And they were able to provide a healthy existence for my grandfather. And that led to so many other things. If they hadn't done that, would I be here? Would I be sitting here with you folks?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's difficult to pin down what family tradition was, and so I feel like when I think about that, I think more about fantasy and invention of persona and things like that, and how that intersects with my family, and how the tradition of, I guess, invention or fantasy is something that I want to carry forward. The only things that I can think of that maybe echo from the ancestors is that fantasy, because everything was lost. There's so much trauma in the family history that I've inherited that digging out the joy and trying to find a platform to amplify that is I guess what I'm excited about to pass forward.
I know you're a big fan of sci-fi written by Black authors. A lot of youth of color, that kind of muscle of imagination, of fictional thinking, hasn't been practiced in stable conditions for a long time, because it's always so concerned with how do we survive, how do we keep a roof over our head, how do we have health care, insurance, and so your brain doesn't ever get away from those immediate concerns. So I think in a weird way, I would say that is a tradition. If we think about visions and dreams and the total confidence that you author real things from visions and dreams.
I mean, there's a huge privilege in being an artist or being able to fantasize and being Black or indigenous, or like that is definitely something that I saw in like my great-grandfather, for example, and just imagining what that was like when he's the only Black person in this small town. It's like the outdoors is like a place of violence and fear for a lot of Black folks now. And also because that's what we've inherited. Yeah. Like I have so many friends who won't go camping, you know? Yeah. That's not for nothing, you know?
We've had a few different gatherings here. One with the founder of Outdoor Afro, who, I mean, it's exactly that same theme of just sort of saying that people of color have been raised to believe that somehow camping is for white people. And that comes from the legacy of colonization. Lindsey, you've been here at Tippet Rise from the beginning. I know, and you've been, working incredibly hard in terms of everything that has been created here and all the people that we've been inviting, conceiving Relevance of Place, reaching out to people like Ben who are local. What are some of the things that you're hearing when, say, even hearing Heather's last point?
Maybe a year or so after being here, I made it one of my priorities to start reaching out to different indigenous or native leaders, different professors or head of departments that I felt would educate our staff and our guests about how sacred this place is, not just to the Absalica people, but to the people before, because it is a place that it will take time for us to continue to learn and understand, but it is something that is immensely important to our organization to start having conversations with amazing, incredible, open-minded, caring, warming individuals such as yourselves, because these are the conversations that we want to be having and know that these are things that we want to evolve with. We just know it's going to take time.
And they're challenging.
Very challenging, yeah.
There's so many interesting things about how each of you seems to me find form and flip it or pivot or do your special thing with it. And I wonder if you could just share about how the tradition of imagining influences how you think about form.
For me, it's thinking about, might start with a family archive or a found archive or a fantasy novel. And then quite literally pulling out spaces that I find intersect with my narrative. Sometimes it can be quoted from a photograph and quite literal, but other times it's like, a fantasy novel, and it's based on description and the imagination of how I pictured that.
Yeah, I think literalism is actually kind of like it's like a gateway drug to the spectacular, because this kind of snowball of things that we might think, like, how does all that come together? If I think about the artists who I responded to today and growing up, they were the artists who didn't make sense when they were making work initially. Like I said, that challenges Native people not only to expand their comfort zone and to maybe kind of direct them to a space that I don't see very many Native people occupying, but also to kind of like build that muscle for themselves to question. And maybe that's one of the best things that art has taught me. Your job is to question things.
And I think you're right a lot of times. I mean, it is a certain baggage that we carry, and maybe we put it on ourselves most days. Like for me particularly, if I do something that's outside of the norm, then I am in my community, and I have people wagging the finger and giving me bad eyes and maybe even coming to my house. And so that other part of the social control that still exists, for us. Mm-hmm. So maybe the artists would have been called something else in a different time,
What were you talking about yesterday about space? I didn't get to hear all of that.
Yeah, I think I was just talking a little bit about the difference between space and place. Space felt like freedom and open and the possible and expansive and boundless, where place had more concrete associations and like memory, and space felt nimble in a way. And that felt more exciting to me to think about that in relation to goals for the work, I guess.
You offer space for people to play. Like in the images that you showed, it seems like it's kids of all ages and adults of all ages and people from all backgrounds, and they're just kind of crawling all over and inside of.
Yeah, platforming people to exist.
Yeah.
In terms of thinking about land as a space, there's only so much space left, and I've seen my space, the space that I grew up on, the reservation in Lodge Grass, Montana. I've seen it in a lot of ways get smaller and the world get more connected. It's changed in a lot of ways, and so I'm wondering if the space or the place that we have will stay the same, you know, in my conception of it from when I was a kid. As artists, we have to protect the spaces that we conceptualize and that we know, I think, so that, you know, those memories can live on. And if we're able to share little pieces of beauty from those places or from those experiences, I think we're doing our job. I had this random thought the other day. I was like, you know, I'm indigenous, and if I went to space, would I still be indigenous, or would I just be human? You know, I'm indigenous, and I think it's only applicable.
I have some things for you to read about native futurism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really appreciate hearing everything that you guys just said, but coming back to Tippet Rise and land and place is exactly a big reason we are here where we are, is because we are able to conserve and preserve this land, which borders one of the largest wilderness areas in the lower 48. And that's something that we feel so honored to be able to share and make accessible to our guests and to artists and musicians, and to provide an experience for people that we hope will be in existence for a long time to come. Because as you're saying, some of these wilderness spots or nature or land masses are becoming a bit smaller. So that is something that's extremely important to Tippet Rise, is preserving this land.
I think if people can take away with them that what they're looking at when they look at this land or any other kind of natural phenomena, it is them. Like, it is truly, they need to see it as an extension of themselves. And when they make decisions, when we make decisions that harm the land, we are also harming ourselves. And it is a very clear cycle of self-loathing and also of self-care.
What's your thinking lately about collaborating with other artists or with communities or other experts these days?
I love like visiting a space and like starting with just meeting people and feeling, thinking about what research they're interested in and what things they're thinking about and how they might overlap with the stuff I'm thinking about without thinking about form at all in the beginning. And then like when I vibe with somebody, like my favorite part is like finding like a dancer that I vibe with, and then we're like, okay, the nature of building something enormous requires you to work with other people first of all. And so just practically you need to find a language, and that I think search in communication is really intrinsic to a lot of the concepts in my work.
Collaboration has been very, very important up to now, I think, in working with local Montana artists for the most part, you know, and it's not always present, but for me, collaboration comes with my community. And like I said, it comes with local artists. And so working with, say youth to maybe even just expose them to like street art, or collaboration with teachers, you know, and educators. So really collaboration has been very important, but it's operated in a different realm for me in my practice.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah.
For me, it's probably grown out of like the way I've said, you know, I became interested in narrative. I became interested in movement. I became interested in sound. At this point, I feel like I'm not looking to add anything to my list of things, but that's where the collaborations come in, is working with people who are incredible at movement or incredible at lighting, and, you know, reaching out to them.
That you can do something better than me.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm never going to learn this as good as you know this. And so I think that's been a really wonderful thing. And I think for me also, it's a way, working with other, not only Native and Indigenous artists, but also just artists of color and queer artists. It's like the ethics of that is you let the people in that community do what they do. Like, I'm not there to direct them.
You're in a tacit collaboration with Tippet Rise by agreeing to be here. Thanks to Lindsey and Kathy and Peter Halstead and Pete, Rayma, all of the people who've worked so hard on Relevance of Place. I wonder if you have a last set of thoughts or hopes for the future in terms of your own practice, but also anything in terms of values or hopes you might share for those at Tippet Rise about what the future might hold.
My hopes for Tippet Rise really look towards the future in thinking about how do we include everybody's voice, everybody's history. And I mean, at Tippet Rise, I see a huge emphasis on classical music, for example. And that's, for me, that's really one-sided. I would hope that the advocacy for bringing the youth and continuing to share stories and build space for them to understand what art can be in this place. Because as I've traveled from school to school to school in Montana, kids don't know what art can be. They don't know that they can bring life to their family and their community. And I think Tippet Rise has a potential to do that for many, many people.
I loved hearing that Outdoor Afro came, and I think, I guess my hope or dream for Tippet Rise would be continuing the guests that you have. It's amazing for kids or for people to see themselves in the staff and the people in power and the artwork, and so thinking about how like every part of the space can reflect that mission.
I think there's a different awareness that's available than there was to institutions that were founded, even 30, 40 years ago. And I think one of those, especially with digital media, is it really becomes a platform that can reach beyond the physical borders of Tippet Rise. Institutions historically, and maybe not even so historically, have had to be so concerned with like people coming in the doors, and like how does that justify programming? And in this case, and I think with digital media, it's about how many people are just witnessing it in whatever form, So I think that can be an interesting way of rethinking audience, and like who you're getting. Because in particular with Native communities, there's not really one media platform that kind of speaks to all of these like thousands of micro communities.
I'm just so honored that you felt so comfortable to share your thoughts, especially about music. I remember you and I walking on the land a little over a year ago, and we shared that same story that you just told me now about bringing kids out to Tippet Rise and walking the land and doing art, and how powerful that would have been for you as a boy. I'm really looking forward to having you back in the very near future, because I do know that we are working with some local schools, and that is something that we have high on our list and high on our priority, and to do exactly what you're asking for. But thinking about your digital media element, I mean, it just makes Tippet Rise more accessible. We're not easy to get to. We're a few plane rides for most people, and an hour from the largest populated city, and being able to reach out to just about anybody through that digital media makes a lot of sense.
The commitment to here-ness and to online life seems to be a very big part of how Tippet Rise is starting to understand itself. So I think it is really such a great reinforcement of the path that you're on, but also reinforces what Jeffrey says. It can have a whole different conceptualization of what an audience is possible with it. Yeah.
Thank you for your honesty and being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for being part of Relevance of Place, which has always been something that's about bringing more people here, like you, but also about trying to share this experience to a much wider audience. So thank you for the reinforcement that that's what we should be doing. All right.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.